freedom was a very simple one. That to move from the physical restraint to a place where you had relative ability to move about. After the period of slavery, the concept of freedom became slightly different. It became one of, now that the chains are off, now that the fences are removed, now that the dogs are no longer put on us, now that you no longer have a right to deprive me of the ability to move, then it became clear that even though those things were gone, freedom still was not there. So it became a little less tangible. Even though you couldn't vote, and even though you couldn't walk on the same side of the street, and even though you had to drink out of a special fountain, and even though your children had to go to special schools and you had to live in special areas, the idea though is that somehow it was still less tangible. It was less clear. It was more abstract. But people knew something still was wrong, so they said, freedom means let me participate. So they said, boss, now that the chains are gone, let me do some of what you do. Let me go where you go, eat where you go to the bathroom where you go to the bathroom. Let me live where you live, and let my children go where yours go. And our concept of freedom then became one of participation. And so for almost a half of a century, we worked hard to participate. We wanted to simply do what boss did. And if we were doing what boss was doing, we thought we were free. And we made lots of efforts to try to do what boss did. We prayed, we marched, we sat in, we walked in, we voted, we unvoted, we got beaten down in the streets. We did everything just trying to let boss let us participate. Because the concept of freedom then was just to be able to do what boss was doing. Then the laws got shifted again, and they began to let us do that. We could vote, and we could drink out the same fountain, eat at the same place, sleep in the same place. We really thought that now the freedom was here. Then we kept finding out something still ain't right. It still ain't right. So I tell you what, boss, let us be like you. We want to marry you and listen, we want to go to your school. We don't want no of these colored schools. We want to go to your school, boss. We don't want to have no black community. We want to live integrated. No longer no participation. We want to integrate. We want to live right next to you. We want to pray next to you. We want to sing next to you. We want to do everything right with you. Don't give us none of this old black stuff. None of this old Africa stuff. I'm an American, boss. I'm a real American. And once we began to push for that, we didn't want nothing to keep us from being a good American. We wanted to fight where boss fought. We wanted to go to his war, live in his place. So the thrust then had gone from plantation to participation to membership. We wanted to be shared members, and we thought we'd be free. But then we found out that we got there and we were sitting there and somehow we still didn't feel free. Sitting in his school, still didn't feel free. Reading his book, still didn't feel free. On his television, still didn't feel free. In his plays, still didn't feel free. Everything we did still didn't give us the sense of being free.
So let's pivot a bit to the miseducation piece, the purposeful miseducation piece, because it goes in line with the religion piece, because in my opinion, the religion goes into how we educate, because what you believe will impact what you are taught or the information that you retain. So the school systems are pretty much set up to just give information to teach, especially Black kids, how to retain and recall. Right. So I retain information, I recall it, but I don't really know anything. I haven't really learned anything. And then if I do learn something, it's in a manner that shapes my mind and shapes my skill sets to support white institutions, white corporations. And I'm not necessarily being taught how Dr. Amos Wilson would say, how to solve my problems. I'm being taught how to solve white people's problems. We're being taught how to work in white people's corporations and help white people build their money. But then we come back to our communities, and our communities never change. So what is your thought on the purposeful miseducation of Black children, and throwing a solution of what can we do to start moving toward to educating our kids better towards more solution-based things?
Okay, so that's a good question. I consider this to be the civil rights mentality. Civil rights mentality says go to college and get a degree so that you can get a good job. What is a good job? A good job is a job working for a white-owned corporation. Mm-hmm. And the bigger the corporation is, the better the good job is perceived to be. So instead of trying to fit in to their society, we need to create an independent reality for ourselves. Right. And at the end of the historical day, there's only been two movements of Black people in America. There's been the integration movement and the independence movement. And so the integration movement, they thought that freedom for us meant integrating with our oppressor. These were people like the Urban League, NAACP, Civil Rights Movement. They thought that freedom meant using the public restroom next to certain people, right? On the other hand, you had the independence movement, which was people like Martin Delany, Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X. They were saying we need to create an independent reality for ourselves if we are truly to be free. So our goal should be Black life. And shout out to Brother Shamari in Philly. Life is LIFE. Liberation, independence, freedom, and empowerment. If we're not educating our children to be liberated, independent, free, and empowered, then we're basically teaching them to continue to be a benefit to the system that has basically been oppressing them. And the more we rely on the system, the more they control us. So the point is, we need to be educated to understand that we need self-sufficient control of all of our basic human survival needs. That's our food, clothes, shelter, education, medication, and self-defense. When we can start independent, Black-owned, African-centered schools, we can teach self-sufficiency. We can teach support Black business. We can teach the importance of our culture. And in order to break the chains of psychological slavery, it begins with the education of the children. If we don't take control of what goes into the mind of our children, 50 years from now, we're going to be having the same conversation. Yeah. And so we got to, in order to control that, we must have schools. We must have African-centered schools. No African-centered schools, no Black life. It's that simple. And so we must take control of the education of our children. And then when we do, it can't be the same European-centered education. It has to be African-centered education. And it has to be based on African culture. If we're going to break the chains of psychological slavery, we have to engage in African culture. Now, Brother Joseph, we say that often, but we don't always drill down on that. What does that mean? What is African culture? Aspects of African culture, as studied by anthropologists, include, and this is like the biggest standout, group solidarity, communalism. We sure could use that. Now, we got young people in the street, as young as 12 years old, with guns firing on each other like it means nothing. Right. So we could use some communalism and some group solidarity right now, right? Of values like hospitality and hard work, right? Because a lot of us are lazy and want to rely on the system. So that's something else we can, use to benefit. A deep respect for elders comes out of African culture. I heard a story, Brother Joseph, coming out of DC area, and it was an elder sister on a public bus, and she was getting off the bus at her stop, and she's older, so she's moving slower. And so there were some sisters behind her. They were younger, maybe teens, early 20-somethings. They start cursing the elder. Hurry the F up. You OB, get the F out the way, right? So a respect for elders is something that we can use and benefit from right now. A respect for ancestors comes out of African culture. I always say we need to be mindful of acknowledging our ancestors because after all, without them, there would be no us, right? an emphasis on not just community, but family also. We always hear the statistic that says that 75% of all Black households is headed by a single Black female. Right. And so this idea of keeping the family intact is an African concept that we need to get back to if we're going to thrive. A focus on the well-being of children. I don't know where you live, but where I live, I see children 5, 6 years old, maybe even younger. They're all the way up the street by themselves with no supervision. Right. So we have to be mindful of that. Self-sufficiency and a self-sufficient status where we create for ourselves everything we need. That's also coming out of African culture. Another thing, and we look over this because it's become a really big problem, but a connection to nature and living in one accord with nature where you're not destroying the environment.
Yeah.
That comes out of psychopathic culture. So you have different types of relationships. You have symbiotic relationships where each person or entity in that relationship benefits from the relationship. And then you have parasitic relationships where one personal entity benefits and the other personal entity either suffers or gets exploited, right? Which basically describes capitalism. So a connection to nature and taking care of the earth, right? And not destroying the planet that we actually have to live on. Language has always been a very important cornerstone of culture. As it stands right now, most of us only speak the European or the slaveholders' language of English, right?
Right.
Another key concept in African culture, and I thought this is interesting, teaching morality through storytelling and proverbs. We talk about African people. We don't often talk about the philosophical genius of African people. I'm sure you spent some time on African proverbs. Yeah, very profound, very, very, very interesting. Another thing that comes out of our culture, African culture, that we need to get back to is this concept of diet and what to eat. We eating a European-centered diet based on all that meat. That's not our culture. There's an emergency room surgeon, Dr. Milton Mills. He's a brother. He said most Black people in America have ancestry that come out of West Africa. He said the typical West African diet was leafy greens, nuts, seeds, vegetables, right? Things like that. You didn't eat meat. And if you did, you ate small portions. It wasn't like meat every day, right? And so diet is another aspect of our culture that we need to engage in order to engage in African culture. Right. And again, if we're going to break the chains of psychological slavery, we can't continue to eat all these European foods and have all of the health challenges that go along with it if we hope to, survive into the future. And of course, the Nkuzo Saba, unity, self-determination, collective work, group economics, functioning with a purpose, creativity, having faith in ourselves, and so forth. So, when we talk about education, I hope I'm answering your question.
Yeah.
That education needs to be African-centered. It needs to be based on African culture. It needs to be based on some of the things that I just mentioned, or all of the things that I just mentioned, if we're going to get back to a place where we're surviving and thriving as a people.
Right. So one question is asking about, because you mentioned coming up in psychopathic culture, talking about European culture as psychopathic culture. So correct me if I'm wrong when you're talking about it, but it's the antithesis of African culture, because if African culture is about collectiveness, it's about unity, if it's about working together, and it's about abundance, the psychopathic culture would be the exact opposite: scarcity. So we're going to fight. So we're going to be untrustworthy. Like all of the ills that we can see, the behavior, the bad behaviors that's expressed within Black culture, those are the behaviors that we learn from the psychopathic culture or for European culture. So it's the opposite of living and moving in love and unity. It's in scarcity and fear, and we're going to fight and we're going to tear each other apart because I need to dominate everything. So
yeah, so and I like to give the technical definition of the word psychopath, because if people don't understand that, then they may not understand exactly where I'm going, because I'm seeing a question on the screen in front of me. So by definition, a psychopath is someone that exemplifies antisocial behavior, and that antisocial behavior on occasion is accompanied by violence. Now that to me sounds like Europeans. Now I mentioned there's different kind of relationships. There's symbiotic relationships and there's parasitic relationships. In a parasitic relationship, repeating what I said, one entity or person benefits and the other entity or person suffers or is exploited, as in the case of capitalism. So when I say psychopathic culture, that's what I mean. It's parasitic. It's not communalism. It's not, everyone is going to share equally in the resources. It's exactly what you said. It's we have to fight over this scarcity because we don't know when we're going to eat again, right? This facilitates that individualism and that individuality and that individualistic mentality where I'm going to, and Black people who've got caught up in it, I'm trying to get mine. I'm trying to do me, right? We get caught up in this individualism without realizing how destructive that is. So psychopathic culture is very selfish. It's very parasitic. And it doesn't benefit everyone involved in the exchange, whatever the interaction is.
Right. But it's also another reason why how we educate ourselves and our children is important. So we won't continue to pass down more of the parasitic culture, the psychopathic culture that we continue to pass down to our children and the behavior that we continue to exhibit. Because if I'm a parent and I don't care about the quality of my life, I'm going to pass that down to my children and they could pass it down to theirs. And it's continued cycles, but we also won't spend time learning how to actually solve our problems. How do we fix the problems around us? Because unfortunately now we're literally waiting on our oppressors to fix the problems that they created. And if they do, it's in a Hegelian dialectic way where they can benefit off of the solution.
Parasitic. Right. And so if I could add another layer to the question that was asked about psychopathic culture, something like horror movies is psychopathic entertainment, right? Created by psychopaths. Now, what is psychopathic entertainment going to do but create more psychopaths? Or make you desensitized to brutality and serial killing and all this kind of foolishness. That's coming out of psychopathic culture.
It is. But look, think about how desensitized to violence we've become over the last just 20 years because of social media. I can get on Twitter right now and scroll all day and watch people get killed. If you are doing that, something is wrong with you. That's not normal.
That's right.
But it also desensitizes you. So when you see something in real life, you treat it like it's entertainment. And now you can't differentiate between real life and what's entertainment. And it's a total detachment. So you just go on about your day like you didn't just see somebody get eliminated in front of you.
Exactly. That's crazy.
Because think about it. People go to war and come back with PTSD.
That's right.
So it is a form of it, but it's maybe not as severe because it's like the small doses. But over time, you're going to see you're not right because you keep consuming all of this violence, and that's not natural.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's trauma. It's not natural. And untreated trauma, if it continues to go untreated, only gets worse over time. And so you talked earlier about social engineering. We know what GMO is, right? Genetically modified organism. I say Black people have become PMO, psychologically modified organisms. And the use of the word modified alludes to the idea that there was some intentionality in the modification. That intentionality, again, is coming from the public schools, coming from the media, is coming from the religious institutions, right? Where we don't have this knowledge of ourselves and we don't have a group approach. We need a group approach to solving our problems. And that approach must begin with group loyalty, right? And so this is where something for me like a Black nationalism becomes important. And because from what I'm seeing, the undercurrent to deal with systemic white supremacy has always been Black nationalism. If you study, you're not seeing a lot of activism coming from certain institutions, whether they be religious or some of these other cultures that pop up. The people that are in the demonstrations, engaged in the boycott, engaged in acts of resistance, for the most part, those are your Black nationalists. And so that's the group approach. We must have the group approach and have loyalty to the group if we're going to solve the problems of the group. Because if we're oppressed together, then we have to eliminate oppression together.
Right.
Does that make sense?
No, it's perfect sense. We talked about it at the Friday breakdown, but it also comes out of what Dr. Amos Wilson is talking about: individual power versus group power.
Yeah.
The individual is only empowered by the group that it represents. It's like one single solitary. You talked about it earlier. It could be a 500-pound full-grown lion with a dark black mane. Let him be out there by himself.
Yeah, right. Don't matter.
He's not gonna last long.
That's
because the women, those female lions, are the strength of the pride. He's the muscle. He might be the leader in the muscle, but they're the strength of the pride. We're nothing without each other, and we have to understand that. Like, I don't care. Forget all the pleasantries. Black people, we're nothing without each other.